thousands of acres and dozens of hayfields. And the one I choose to sit on tonight, I've got company right next to me. Hey, it's public land, it is what it is, but it is definitely a little frustrating. Anyways, I put a lot of time into scouting the spot, so I'm not going anywhere. Deer. What's that guy doing? It's North America's most popular and numerous big game animal. It's responsible for billions of dollars pumped into the economy by the overwhelming hordes of folks who hunt it every year. Over the course of decades, this animal has proven itself as a resilient survivor, constantly adapting to its surroundings and carving out a secretive living in some of the most unsuspecting places. It's the white-tailed deer. While the whitetail has been researched endlessly by some of the brightest biologists on the planet, it still ranks as one of the most mysterious and challenging animals to hunt. However, success is not out of reach. Millions of deer are killed every year, providing a feast of somewhere in the neighborhood of 100,000 metric tons of free-ranging, organic meat. For passionate carnivores, venison is about as good as it gets. With a permit to kill 2 white-tailed does and 1 buck at a special place in eastern Nebraska, I was ready to fill my own freezer with a pile of rich protein. Heading southwest out of Sioux City, Iowa, the flatland is eventually interrupted by towering hardwood ridges bordered by the massive Missouri River. Beyond that lies one of the country's many sovereign nations, Winnebago Indian Reservation. I was first introduced to Winnebago by a friend during a casual conversation about turkeys. He recommended I add it to my extensive list of destinations for hunting gobblers. I did, and it only took one spring sunrise for Winnebago to really grow on me. I knew right away I needed to return that fall to hunt something with 4 legs.
The Hunger is supported by
You never know where a door knock and a handshake might lead you. During my first trip to Winnebago, it led me to Don and Heath Barclay and their cozy ranch on the west side of town. A casual conversation in their barn led to a relationship that will last forever. Now, I stay in the basement of their home whenever I visit Winnebago. The Barclays are one of many non-tribal families that occupy private residence on the reservation and lease tribal land for farming, working crops, and managing a beef cattle herd.
Oh, this ranch here, we moved on it in 1985, and we've been here ever since. It's been a good ranch for us, and my folks got pushed out of Sioux City, Iowa in the flood in 1952, and my dad tore down an old barn, and my mom worked a job, and where she worked, they loaned her $150, and they built that house, that cabin. And there was 9 kids that lived out there in that house. There was 4 girls and the 5 boys, and the boys stayed in the bunkhouse and the girls stayed in in the cabin, which is not a large place. Its dimensions are about 30 by 30. And in them days, we carried water to the house, and my folks, raised a pretty good sized family there till the fall of '59.
We're sporting about 270, 280 head of stock cows, and we're running between pasture and which was grassland, and our alfalfa ground and row crop, about 2,000 acres. We have an aunt here and a cousin that works with us. Tend to problems as far as maybe you have a calf that didn't want to nurse or something that didn't get his first milk. They will help get that cow in. The cattle are checked about every 2-3 hours through the daytime, and then when evening comes, we try to get our tagging all done before we do our evening feed. People that like to go to the zoo or the petting zoo, we got our own zoo here we're at every day. And we like other people to come. We get to see their face light up.
The thing is us guys here, we love our jobs. Couldn't be any better. I said I'm getting new calves, the ground's dry, and I love my job. I guess I'm pretty happy today. So,
The Barclays are literally helping to feed the world. Reality is, there will never be enough wild game to support the diets of our booming population, and there will never be a time when everyone chooses to hunt or grow their own food. Big or small, the agriculture and ranching industries aren't going anywhere. And that's okay, we need them. But the ability to buy packaged meat on grocery store shelves makes it too easy for us to become disconnected from our food and where it comes from. And that's not okay. There's no excuse to lose control over what we're putting in our bodies. Stop paying attention, and pink slime, fillers, chemicals, you'll get your fill. But this sketchy business isn't happening on the back pasture of folks like the Barclays. Look in their freezer and you'll find fresh cuts of the finest beef. Your meat is being abused farther up the supply chain, oftentimes behind closed doors where profits outweigh integrity. Buy your meat from the store, and you'd better pay attention. Hunt for your own meat, and you know exactly what you're getting from field to fork.
The Hunger is supported by
The first morning of my Winnebago whitetail hunt finally arrived, and I was ready to make meat. I had a pretty good idea of where I wanted to hunt based on my knowledge of the area from spring turkey season, but the habits of deer and their environment can change drastically throughout the year. Literally and figuratively, I was starting in the dark. I chose to climb to the top of a familiar ridge and set up a ground blind. I checked my scent cone before heading up, and the wind was supposed to be perfect for that spot. That's assuming deer were traveling where I expected. The morning, albeit beautiful, offered no sightings of deer. Turkeys and cows milled around the pasture, and a passing coyote slinked through our setup. No doubt, he was also looking for a meal. Prime time passed that morning, and I became restless. But first, I wanted to go for a walk and see if there were any recent signs of deer on the ridge. Sure enough, I came across a fresh trail slicing through the morning dew.
So we decided to get out of the ground blind. Probably just gonna wrap it up here, but got a couple ridges that I want to go look over. It's always that allure of what's gonna be over the next ridge, and that's kind of what I'm feeling right now. And actually, we've got this trail here, fresh from the morning, cutting through the dew. You can see a deer's been through here, so who knows, maybe we'll bump into it. Not really expecting it, but we're gonna give it a shot.
You can never predict how a hunt will play out, and that's half the thrill of it. This opportunity came in the blink of an eye. Thanks to a well-placed nozzler ballistic tip bullet, I found venison success at the end of a very short blood trail. The most rewarding part of the hunting process occurs with a knife in hand, turning a hard-earned animal into well-deserved meat. Butchering is an art that requires a sharp blade and a steady hand. Practice makes perfect, and with one deer in my Engel cooler, I was ready to fill another Winnebago tag and practice some more.
The Hunger is supported by
I feed my hunger with a Mossberg because it's built rugged and proudly American.
Hi, I'm Mitch Kezar. I'm an outdoor photographer, outdoor writer, commercial photographer, archer, gun hunter, bird hunter, dog fancier, and I like to eat wild meat. I'm really amped up about this series, The Hunger, and here's why. It's been a long time since anybody really addressed the whole issue of why do we hunt? We hunt because we like to eat these animals for food, for really, really good food. We're responsible, we're caring, we're careful, and we're diligent in our efforts to make and feed to our families and friends, and to treat those animals with the respect they deserve, and do an absolutely wonderful job of preparing that meat, taking care of the game, and finishing off that hunt the way it should be. I got to hunger about 30 years ago, and I decided that when I got back into hunting at a much older age, I was going to take the efforts of my hunts, the meat, treat it well, learn as much as I could about preparing that meat and making great meals for my family. And now I'd like to just continue that by sharing everything I know with everybody that wants to listen. We started off with a great piece of venison, a rump roast for general purposes. It came off the hind quarter of the deer, trimmed off all the silver skin, the connective tissue, and Kelvin got a pretty good chunk of that. He's a fan of the trimmings, I'll tell you. After that, we injected some garlic shards into the meat. And then slathered that guy up with a little bit of walnut oil and a chipotle raspberry rub. It sat on the pellet grill for a couple of hours and got a nice brown, crusty outside to it, and nice and juicy on the inside when we finished it up. On the Camp Chef pellet grill that we're using has a probe on it, which is pretty darn handy. You stick that into the roast at the time it goes on, turn your heat up, and then when it gets to about 155 degrees on the inside, pretty much going to come out medium rare to rare in the middle. And threw some little yellow gold potatoes on the grill about the same time that the meat went on. Those potatoes take a pretty good while to get done on the grill. And those were in nothing but a little bit of olive oil and black cracked pepper and sea salt. Now we got that beautiful venison roast on the grill, and it's about ready to come off. So I always like to honor a piece of meat like that by serving it up with a beautiful, colorful array of fresh, organic when possible vegetables. So tonight, a little stir fry and cast iron is the order of the day. And relative to what cooks the fastest, I usually like to get my onions done first, because when you throw those babies in there, the longer you leave them in the stir fry. And on the spices, I threw a little spices in with the peanut oil. They get done first, they caramelize, they get a little on the sweet side like onions do. It's a pretty good deal. I'm making a little thickener for the stir fry. Take a little cornstarch in a jar. Time and experience will just kind of teach you when this stuff's all ready. I know that we're going to be a few minutes here getting the meat ready to roll, so I'm going to actually put this on now. And since it's a fine cast iron product, it'll retain heat for a long, long time. So I'm just going to get this perfect, and I'm going to shut it down, put the lid on it, When we come back from getting the meat ready to go, this will be ready to serve. The ingredients are pretty important, but there's no hard and fast rules to any of this sort of stuff. It's all instinctive and fun to play with, because it's not the last meal you're ever going to eat. You get to try it again. So you can try lots of different spices, lots of different rubs, a bunch of different oils. All of them taste different. You'll find some after a while that you really like. They're just flavorful and they work, and they kind of get to be your mainstay. And it's like, well, tonight I'm going to make this, and it even gets a name.
The Hunger is supported by
Going into any hunt without prior recon is tough, especially when you can only carve out a few days to make something happen. At a place like Winnebago, you're fortunate to have seemingly endless ground at your fingertips, and most of it's crawling with deer. But such a vast tract of land is a double-edged sword, because it's hard to know where to even start. This here is classified as a minimum maintenance road, and as you can see, they haven't done even minimum maintenance on it. It's I don't know, you tell me if it's passable. To put more eyeballs on the ground, I hung plot washer trail cameras at some promising spots to see if I could find any deer moving during daylight hours. In the meantime, I'd put my boots on the ground. I chose to spend the evening in a secluded valley where I expected to see buck activity. It was one of those sits where you constantly expect to see the subtle flash of a deer, but the woods were still and silent other than talkative owls. We found ourselves at dawn the next morning along the same ridge where I had killed the doe a day earlier. Fog lifted from the farm fields as hot and cold air mingled at sunrise. There didn't seem to be much action, so we decided to see if another lucky walk would lead us to a deer. Sure enough, I spotted a doe feeding on the edge of a thicket. She had no idea we were there, watching her from 200 yards away, so I took my time and prepared for a standing shot over the tall grass. Having forgotten my shooting sticks back at the ranch, I was forced to use a camera tripod as a rest. It felt like a good shot, but the deer didn't fall in sight. Never a good feeling. As a hunter, success is never a given. You have no choice but to embrace failures, learn from your mistakes, and constantly improve your game. Deer can usually be patterned on hayfields during late summer and early fall, so I spent the afternoon scouting Winnebago for the right field. I found just the right spot. It had thriving green alfalfa, and they had just baled a bunch of hay into round bales, which would perfectly mask my ground blind. We arrived hours before dusk. When you draw a tag to hunt at Winnebago, it's a given that you might be forced to rub elbows with other hunters. But during this hunt, I didn't expect to encounter much, if any, competition, because I had drawn a coveted special trophy season permit. This permit allows me and only a small group of other hunters to use a rifle from the end of August through the end of December, a time when most deer hunters aren't even thinking about hunting yet, and the few who are usually bow hunters. Put simply, I had a significant advantage with my Mossberg. Despite the interference of the eager bow hunter, my hopes remained high that a deer would show itself on the hayfield before dark. Seemingly, out of thin air, a doe appeared.
That happened really fast. I did not expect that. All of a sudden I looked out at the field and there was just this deer glowing in the sunset, and had to readjust, and it got a little bit crazy here in the blind, but man, make no mistake, this hunt is all about the entire experience, but we came here to put food on the table.
Thankfully, this is what you practice for. Not only is it a good shot, it's a perfect shot. I'm surprised she went as far as she did. You know, that's always the ultimate goal of any hunter, is you want to kill that animal as quickly and humanely and ethically as possible. And this was a perfect shot. I couldn't be happier. It's going to be a long night ahead of us. Making meat is it's very rewarding work, and we got some work ahead of us, so very, very blessed.
The Hunger is supported by
Most experts agree that the glory days of whitetail hunting have come and gone. EHD, other diseases, predation, habitat loss, all these factors are influencing the national whitetail population. Now, we're never going to get the high numbers that we had maybe 10, 20 years ago, but we do need to conserve the whitetails that remain and make sure they're going to be here for generations to come. And the most proactive way you can do that is by supporting an organization like Whitetails Unlimited. No deer, no hunting, no venison. Not a good situation. So chip in for whitetails and feed your hunger by joining Whitetails Unlimited today. Amidst my scouting for an area that held promise of antlered beasts, I was fortunate to meet a man named David Carnes. The hunger is about way more than acquiring meat. It's a lifestyle, and it's fed by all the experiences and people you meet along the way. If it weren't for hunting, I'd probably never meet guys like David.
My name is David Carnes. My Lakota name is Wadita Mato. I share blood with the Ho-Chunk tribe here in Winnebago. From as early back as I could remember, which is probably somewhere around when I was 3.5 years old. I can remember back that far. I remember my dad bringing in rabbits and squirrels and putting them on the table, and my grandmother lived with me, my mom's mom. My grandma would cook squirrels the way that the traditionalists did around here. And then when I turned like probably 4, I hit my dad up to go hunting with him. Or he run a trap line, and I begged him to go. And he kept saying, "You can't keep up. You know, this is work. This is what we're making a living on." But I cried around through a fit. He ended up taking me. He didn't take me again for 2 years till I was 6. But I mean, it was in my blood then. I just loved it. So winter months, you depended on that hunting and fishing. It started with the ducks in the fall and the pheasants and the squirrel. And as kids, we got into the bighorns, but it was mainly still about meat. It's that you go like say, I'm going to say just 22 years ago. That's what everybody would still be shooting those. I turned 14 years old and I shot just a phenomenal buck, the 22 automatic. And it was a magazine fed. And like I said, since the time I was 6, I could shoot light bulbs that were the size of a 22 shell at 25 feet. I'd go 50 for 50 shots on that. Out of 18 shots, I had 17 in his throat and 1 down in his chest. And he was running dead, but I was just kept pulling the trigger. And my dad come up and he was impressed with the size of the buck and that I stuck it out and got him, because my other brothers, sun started going down, they got scared and went back to the vehicle. So he told me, he said, "I think you're big enough to start using the big gun." And I couldn't believe it. I got to use his 30-30 with an old side mount Weaver on there, 4-power scope. And once he let me start using that 30-30, on average, I was probably shooting about 30 deer a year. I mean, I shot deer for my grandpa, I shot deer for my uncles, I shot deer for us.
I was relieved to have more venison on ice. Filling the remaining buck tag in my pocket would be a nice bonus, but it wasn't necessary to call this hunt a success. Regardless, I'd give it my best shot. Like so many other hunts, my last few hours at Winnebago stood before me like a shadow, closing in all too quickly. In between morning and evening hunts, when I was hanging around the Barclays, I'd made friends with a ranch hand, and he revealed the whereabouts of a certain hayfield where I supposedly had high odds of encountering a buck. I trusted his words of wisdom, and that's where I chose to spend my final evening. Just as I had been told, this field was ripe with deer. Does and fawns piled into the hay for dinner. A buck just had to be lurking somewhere in those woods, waiting to join the party. Had my wits been quicker, I probably could have stopped the deer with a whistle or by yelling, but I was taken aback by the sudden burst of activity. The deer weren't spooked by any means. The buck was just chasing the does, so I was convinced he'd come back out to the field before dark. It wasn't 20 minutes later when this buck stepped back onto the field, directly in front of me. We didn't get it on video, but actually, it would be kind of tough to watch. And that's because what happened next was painful. I was steady on my rest, my breathing was controlled, safety was off, finger on the trigger. All I was waiting for was for this buck to just slightly turn broadside. What do you know, out of nowhere, the neighbors start firing off a semi-automatic rifle. All we heard was a string of gunshots, and that buck blazed off the field full speed, never to be seen again. The hunt was over. It was tough to stomach that cursed turn of events, but at the same time, it's almost like it was meant to be. This is a story that you just simply can't make up, and one that I'll be able to share at hunting camps forever. Plus, I still have a buck tag that's good for Winnebago all year, so now I have an excuse to go back.